Billionaire watches 38 experts fail to solve a 974B issue until an 8-year-old janitor's daughter does the impossible and leaves everyone stunned. Before we share this touching account of despair and solitude, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more powerful stories. The silence in the Whitmore Industries boardroom was deafening. 38 pairs of eyes stared at the massive whiteboard covering the entire wall. Its surface a chaotic maze of equations, formulas, and crossed-out calculations that had consumed 3 grueling months. Dr. Harrison Whitmore III, at 62, had built his empire on solving the impossible, but today felt different. His $974 billion Electronics and Physics Research Corporation had hit a wall that seemed impenetrable. "Gentlemen, ladies," Harrison's voice cut through the tension like a blade. His silver hair caught the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 47th floor. "We're burning through $2 million daily while this remains unsolved." The equations sprawled before them represented more than mathematics. It was the key to revolutionizing quantum computing, potentially worth trillions. Every brilliant mind in the room, from MIT professors to Nobel laureates, had failed. Dr. Sarah Chen, Harvard's youngest physics professor at 34, shook her head in frustration. Professor Michael Rodriguez from Stanford, whose breakthrough in particle physics had earned him international acclaim, rubbed his temples. "Sir," Dr. Chen spoke carefully, "perhaps we need to approach this differently. The quantum field interactions here defy conventional thinking is exactly what got us nowhere," Harrison interrupted, his frustration evident. 3 months ago, this had seemed straightforward. Now, with 38 of the world's most brilliant minds stumped, doubt crept in like poison. The equation mocked them from the board, a complex integration of quantum field theory and electromagnetic dynamics that would unlock instantaneous data processing. The implications were staggering: medical breakthroughs, space exploration, artificial intelligence beyond current imagination. Outside the boardroom, life continued its normal rhythm. Maria Santos, 43, pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway, her weathered hands gripping the handle tightly. 20 years of cleaning these floors had taught her to move invisibly through this world of privilege. Behind her, small footsteps echoed. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma had no choice but to accompany her mother to work during winter break. Emma's stomach growled audibly in the empty hallway. They'd shared a single piece of toast for breakfast, and lunch was still hours away. But the little girl's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she peered through the boardroom's glass walls. The adults inside looked angry, frustrated, defeated, but that enormous board covered in numbers made her heart race with excitement. "Mama, why do those people look so sad?" Emma whispered in Spanish. "They have problems we cannot understand, mija," Maria replied, not looking up from her work. "Stay quiet." But Emma couldn't look away. Her mind, sharp beyond her years from necessity, began processing the symbols and numbers. While others saw impossible complexity, she saw patterns, beautiful, logical patterns that seemed to dance before her eyes. Inside the boardroom, Harrison was losing patience. "I've invested everything in this project. Our competitors are breathing down our necks. If we can't solve this..." "Mr. Whitmore," Professor Rodriguez interrupted, "with respect, some problems simply require more time. Perhaps another approach..." "Time is what we don't have." Harrison slammed his hand on the mahogany table. "Johnson Industries is 6 months behind us, but they're gaining ground. One breakthrough from them, and we lose everything." The room fell silent again. Careers hung in the balance. Reputations built over decades faced destruction. The greatest minds of their generation sat defeated by mathematics itself. What none of them noticed was the small face pressed against the glass, dark eyes moving rapidly across the whiteboard, absorbing every symbol, every failed attempt, every frustrated erasure. Emma's mind worked differently than theirs, not burdened by years of academic constraints, not limited by conventional approaches. The morning stretched on, marked only by the sound of erasers against the whiteboard and the quiet desperation of brilliant people facing their limitations. In 12 hours, Harrison would face his board of directors. In 3 days, the quarterly report would determine the company's future. Outside in the hallway, Emma's stomach growled again, but her eyes remained fixed on the mathematical symphony before her. Something extraordinary was about to happen, though none of the adults suspected that salvation might come from the most unexpected source imaginable. The clock ticked toward a moment that would change everything. Dr. James Morrison from MIT slumped in his leather chair, the weight of failure heavy on his shoulders. At 56, he'd solved complex theoretical problems that had stumped generations of physicists, but this equation seemed to mock his very existence. Beside him, Dr. Elena Vasquez from Caltech nervously tapped her pen against her notebook, filled with failed attempts. "We're missing something fundamental," she whispered to Dr. Morrison. "Look at Section 3. The quantum interference patterns don't align with the electromagnetic field calculations." "I've noticed," Morrison replied grimly. "But every adjustment we make creates cascading errors in Sections 5 through 8. Harrison paced behind them like a caged lion. His empire, built over 3 decades, teetered on the edge of collapse. The Whitmore name had meant innovation, breakthrough, victory. Not this crushing defeat that threatened to destroy everything his grandfather had started in 1952. "Sir," Dr. Chen addressed Harrison, "perhaps we should consider bringing in quantum computing specialists from IBM or Google." "Already tried." Harrison's voice carried the exhaustion of a man pushed beyond his limits. "They're as stumped as we are. Their best estimates put a solution at 18 months minimum." 18 months. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Johnson Industries would have their quantum processor in market within 12 months. The technological revolution that should have belonged to Whitmore would slip through their fingers like sand. In the hallway outside, Emma pressed closer to the glass wall. Her small hand traced equations in the air, following the logical flow that the adults seemed unable to see. Years of hunger had sharpened her mind. Necessity had taught her to find patterns where others saw chaos. While her mother cleaned conference rooms filled with abundance, Emma survived on scraps and developed a different way of thinking. "The derivative here," she whispered to herself in English, her accent soft but clear. "It's not right. They're treating it like a linear progression, but quantum fields don't work that way." Her words were too quiet for anyone to hear, lost in the thick glass and the heated discussions inside. But her mind raced ahead, seeing connections that decades of academic training had somehow obscured. Maria noticed her daughter's intense focus and approached quickly. "Emma, Mija, come away from there. These are important people with important work." "But Mama, they're doing it wrong," Emma said, her young voice carrying absolute certainty. "The numbers, they're fighting each other instead of dancing together." "What do you mean?" Maria asked, though she understood little of her daughter's gift with numbers. Teachers had mentioned Emma's unusual abilities, but in their world of survival, there was no time or money for special programs. "Look," Emma pointed at a section of the board visible through the glass. "That part there. They're forcing the equation to be something it doesn't want to be, like trying to make a circle into a square." Inside the boardroom, tension reached a breaking point. Professor Rodriguez stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need fresh air. This is impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Harrison declared, but his voice lacked conviction. "Our grandfathers put men on the moon with slide rules. We have quantum computers and AI assistants. And sometimes," Dr. Chen said quietly, "the most sophisticated tools can blind us to simple solutions." Her words carried unintended prophecy, simple solutions. While they debated and theorized, while they applied decades of training and Nobel Prize-winning insights, a hungry 8-year-old girl in the hallway was seeing what they could not. Emma's stomach cramped with familiar pain. The cafeteria would throw away hundreds of dollars worth of food today, while she and her mother shared a single sandwich for lunch. But the numbers on that board called to her, begged her to fix what was broken, to heal what was wounded. "Mama," she said suddenly, "what happens to the food they don't eat upstairs?" "They throw it away, Mija. So much waste." Emma's eyes lit up with possibility. What if I could help them solve their problem? What if they're so happy they give us the leftover food? Maria's heart broke at her daughter's innocence. These people don't need help from little girls, Emma. They're the smartest people in the world. But sometimes the smartest people in the world need exactly what they least expect. A fresh perspective, an unbroken spirit, and a mind that sees mathematics not as burden, but as beautiful living art. The morning sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the boardroom where 38 brilliant minds struggled with an equation that an 8-year-old girl had already begun to solve in her heart. By 11 a.m., the boardroom atmosphere had become toxic with desperation. Dr. Michael Torres from Princeton had worked through his third pot of coffee, his hands shaking slightly as he approached the whiteboard one more time. The equation seemed to shift and change before his eyes, mocking every attempt to tame its complexity. "We're approaching this backwards," declared Dr. Rebecca Walsh from Oxford, her British accent sharp with frustration. "The quantum field calculations assume static conditions, but reality is dynamic." "We've tried dynamic modeling," Dr. Chen replied wearily. "Remember Tuesday's attempt? 17 hours of calculations that led nowhere." Harrison stopped pacing and faced his assembled team. His navy suit, perfectly pressed that morning, now showed wrinkles of stress. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be frank. The board meets tonight. If we can't show significant progress, they'll pull funding from this project." The room fell deadly silent. Pulling funding meant more than professional disappointment. It meant the collapse of the most ambitious scientific project of their generation. Careers would end. Dreams would die. The future of quantum computing would belong to someone else. "Sir," Professor Rodriguez spoke carefully, "perhaps we could request an extension." "Explain the complexity." "The board doesn't care about complexity." Harrison's voice carried bitter experience. "They care about results. Johnson Industries announced their breakthrough yesterday. We're running out of time to stay relevant." Outside in the hallway, Emma had convinced her mother to let her sit on the floor near the glass wall, while Maria cleaned nearby offices. The little girl had found a broken crayon in a wastebasket and was working equations on the back of discarded paper, her small fingers moving with surprising precision. "Mija, what are you writing?" Maria asked during a brief break. "I'm fixing their numbers, Mama," Emma replied with the confidence of childhood. "See? They keep trying to make this part equal that part, but they're different types of numbers, like trying to add apples and colors." Maria knelt beside her daughter, looking at the symbols and numbers that meant nothing to her. "How do you know these things, Emma?" "I don't know, Mama. I just see them, like when you look at a broken chair and know how to fix it." It was true. Emma had always seen patterns others missed. While other children struggled with basic arithmetic, she solved complex problems by seeing mathematical relationships as living, breathing entities. Numbers spoke to her in ways that words sometimes failed. Inside the boardroom, Dr. Morrison had reached his breaking point. "Perhaps we should consider that this equation is unsolvable with current mathematical frameworks. Maybe we're attempting something beyond human capability." "No," Harrison's voice cut like steel. "I've bet everything on this project. My reputation, my company, my family's legacy. There has to be an answer." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her calculations, dark circles under her eyes. "We could try dividing the problem into smaller segments. Attack each piece separately." "Already attempted," Dr. Chen replied. "Last week. The segments lose meaning without the whole." The whiteboard had become a battlefield, covered in the debris of intellectual warfare. Erasure marks crossed out failed attempts. Different colored markers showed various approaches, all ending in failure. The original equation, written in bold black ink, remained unchanged, unsolved, undefeated. Emma studied this chaos through the glass and saw something the experts missed. Their approaches fought against the equation's natural flow. They imposed solutions rather than discovering them. They treated mathematics like conquest rather than cooperation. "Mama," she said suddenly, "I need to tell them something." "Tell them what, Mija?" That they're hurting the numbers instead of helping them." Maria's heart ached at her daughter's innocence. "These people are very smart, Emma. They don't need help from—" "But they do, Mama. Look at their faces. They're scared and sad. And the numbers on the board. They're crying." In her child's mind, Emma saw mathematics as alive, with feelings and preferences. The equation wasn't a problem to be solved, but a puzzle that wanted to be understood. The difference between conquest and cooperation might seem small to adults, but it was everything. Harrison glanced at his Rolex, a gift from his father when Whitmore Industries went public 30 years ago. Time was slipping away like sand through his fingers. In 9 hours, he would face a boardroom full of investors who measured success only in profits and patents. What he didn't know was that salvation sat just beyond the glass wall, in the form of a hungry little girl who saw mathematics not as enemy, but as friend. The lunch hour brought no relief to the boardroom. Catered meals from the city's finest restaurant sat untouched on a side table, while 38 brilliant minds continued their battle against mathematical impossibility. The irony wasn't lost on Harrison. Thousands of dollars worth of gourmet food growing cold while desperation grew hot. Dr. Amanda Foster from Yale pushed away her untouched salmon and approached the whiteboard again. Her usually perfect composure had cracked under pressure, revealing the human vulnerability beneath her professional facade. "I keep coming back to Section 7, she announced. "The quantum entanglement variables. Something feels wrong." "Everything feels wrong," muttered Dr. Kevin Park from Berkeley. At 41, he'd published groundbreaking papers on quantum mechanics, but this equation made him feel like a first-year graduate student again. Harrison's phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members, investors, and media outlets who'd gotten wind of the company's struggles. He ignored them all, his focus laser-sharp on the mathematical monster that threatened to destroy everything. "What if," Dr. Walsh suggested, "we're thinking too literally? Quantum mechanics operates on probability and possibility. Maybe our error is assuming definitive solutions." "Probability mathematics were my third attempt," Dr. Chen replied, exhaustion evident in her voice. "The calculations become even more complex." Outside the boardroom, Emma had grown bolder. While her mother cleaned nearby offices, the 8-year-old had moved closer to the glass wall, studying the equation with the intensity of a master chess player analyzing a crucial game. Her stomach had stopped growling. Hunger pangs became background noise when her mind encountered interesting problems. She noticed something the adults seemed to miss. They kept treating each section of the equation as separate entities, but Emma saw the mathematical poetry that connected everything. Like verses in a song, each part meant little alone, but created beautiful harmony together. "Mama," she called softly, "can I ask you something?" Maria looked up from organizing cleaning supplies. "See, Mija, what is it? When you clean a really big mess, do you clean each tiny piece separately, or do you see the whole room and clean in a pattern?" "I see the whole room, of course. Otherwise I'd waste time and miss connections." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "That's what they're not doing. They're cleaning each tiny piece but not seeing the whole room." Maria didn't understand the mathematics, but she understood her daughter's gift for seeing patterns others missed. Teachers had mentioned Emma's unusual abilities, though no one had time or resources to explore them properly. In their world, survival took priority over genius. Inside the boardroom, tension had reached dangerous levels. Tempers flared as exhaustion and pressure took their toll. Dr. Torres slammed his marker down, leaving a frustrated streak across the whiteboard. "This is impossible," he declared. "We're wasting time, money, and reputations on something that may not have a solution." "Every problem has a solution," Harrison insisted, but his voice carried less conviction than before. My grandfather used to say that impossibility is just another word for not yet figured out. Doctor, Morrison looked up from his calculations, his expression grave. With respect, sir, your grandfather wasn't dealing with quantum field dynamics that operate outside conventional mathematical frameworks. Conventional frameworks? Harrison repeated thoughtfully. What if that's exactly the problem? The room fell silent as 38 brilliant minds contemplated the possibility that their greatest strength, years of academic training and conventional thinking, might be their greatest weakness. Emma pressed her small hand against the glass wall, her dark eyes tracking across the equation with mechanical precision. In her mind, she could see the solution flowing like water, natural and inevitable. The numbers wanted to dance together, but the adults kept forcing them into rigid formations that fought their essential nature. Her breath fogged the glass as she whispered, "You just need to let them be friends." Doctor. Foster paused mid-calculation, a strange feeling washing over her. For a moment, she thought she heard something, not words exactly, but a different way of thinking. She glanced toward the glass wall, but saw only empty hallway. The afternoon sun shifted, casting new shadows across the boardroom. Time continued its relentless march toward evening, when Harrison would face his board of directors without a solution. What he needed was a miracle. What he had was much better. A little girl with an empty stomach and a full heart, who understood that mathematics wasn't about conquest, but about cooperation. The equation waited patiently on the whiteboard, ready to reveal its secrets to the one mind capable of seeing them clearly. The afternoon light cast long shadows across the boardroom as desperation reached fever pitch. Doctor. Jennifer Liu from Stanford had filled an entire supplementary whiteboard with attempted solutions, each one crossing out in red ink like mathematical tombstones. The air conditioning worked overtime against the heat generated by brilliant minds under impossible pressure. "We're missing something fundamental, Doctor," Rodriguez declared, his voice hoarse from hours of discussion. "Every approach leads to the same dead end in Section 12. Harrison hadn't sat down in 3 hours. His pristine office had become a war room, and he was a general watching his army fail against an enemy that couldn't be defeated through conventional means. The weight of 3 generations of family legacy pressed down on his shoulders like a physical force. "Sir," Dr. Park spoke hesitantly, "perhaps we should consider alternative approaches. Instead of solving the complete equation, we could develop partial solutions that..." "Partial solutions won't revolutionize quantum computing." Harrison cut him off sharply. "Johnson Industries isn't pursuing partial solutions. They're going for the complete breakthrough, and they're gaining on us every day." The truth hung heavy in the air. Partial victory was total defeat in the high-stakes world of technological innovation. Second place meant irrelevance, and irrelevance meant the slow death of everything Harrison's family had built. Outside the boardroom, Emma had found a comfortable spot on the marble floor where she could observe the equation while staying out of her mother's way. Maria worried about her daughter sitting so still for so long, but Emma seemed happier watching the numbers than playing with the few toys they could afford. "Mija," Maria said during a brief break, "are you hungry? I have half a sandwich." "Not now, Mama," Emma replied, her eyes never leaving the whiteboard. "They're so close, but they keep pushing when they should be pulling." "What do you mean?" Emma looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed much older than her 8 years. "It's like when you try to open a door by pushing, but it only opens when you pull. They keep pushing the numbers, but the numbers want to be pulled into place." Maria didn't understand the mathematics, but she understood her daughter's metaphors. Emma had always seen the world differently, explaining complex concepts through simple analogies that somehow captured deeper truths. Inside the boardroom, Dr. Walsh had reached her breaking point. "I need air," she announced, gathering her notes. "This is the most challenging problem I've encountered in 23 years of research. None of us can afford to give up." Harrison's voice carried a desperate edge. "I've mortgaged everything on this project. If we fail, Whitmore Industries becomes a footnote in someone else's success story." Dr. Chen looked up from her calculations, sympathy in her tired eyes. "Sir, we understand the pressure, but perhaps—" An alarm suddenly blared through the building, cutting off her words. Emergency lights flashed as the fire safety system activated, triggered by smoke from an overheated printer in a nearby office. The piercing sound shattered everyone's concentration. "False alarm," Harrison announced after checking his phone. "Maintenance is resetting the system." But the interruption had broken something in the room's atmosphere. 38 brilliant minds, stretched to their breaking points, suddenly felt the full weight of their failure. The equation mocked them from the whiteboard, unchanged despite their best efforts. Emma pressed her hands over her ears as the alarm continued, but her eyes remained fixed on the mathematical poetry before her. In the chaos of sound and flashing lights, something shifted in her understanding. The numbers seemed to rearrange themselves, showing her pathways that the adults couldn't see. When silence finally returned, Emma stood up from her spot on the floor. Her small legs were stiff from sitting so long, but her mind buzzed with excitement. She could see the solution now, clear as daylight, beautiful in its elegant simplicity. "Mama," she whispered urgently, "I need to tell them something important." "Tell them what, Misha?" "How to make the numbers happy." Maria's heart ached at her daughter's innocence. These were the smartest people in the world, working on problems that determined the future of technology itself. What could a hungry 8-year-old possibly tell them? But Emma's certainty was absolute. She'd seen the solution the way she saw sunrise through their apartment window. Inevitable, natural, and beautiful. The adults were fighting mathematics instead of dancing with it, and she knew exactly how to show them the difference. The equation waited patiently on the whiteboard, ready to surrender its secrets to the one mind that approached it with wonder instead of weapons. The late afternoon sun cast golden light through the boardroom windows, illuminating what looked like an intellectual battlefield. Coffee cups formed rings on expensive mahogany, crumpled papers overflowed from wastebaskets, and the air hung thick with the desperation of brilliant minds facing defeat. The equation sprawled across multiple whiteboards like some mathematical hydra, growing more complex with each failed attempt to tame it. Dr. Morrison had given up pretending to maintain professional composure. His usually immaculate appearance showed signs of the day's warfare: loosened tie, wrinkled shirt, hair disheveled from repeated, frustrated gestures. "I hate to say this," he announced to the room, "but I'm beginning to think we're attempting the impossible." "Udo, impossible is not a word in the Whitmore vocabulary," Harrison replied, but his voice carried the hollow ring of a man trying to convince himself as much as others. The empire his grandfather built, the legacy his father expanded, the future he'd promised his own children, all of it teetered on the edge of mathematical impossibility. "Doctor." Vasquez approached the main whiteboard one final time, her movements showing the weariness of a marathon runner nearing collapse. "The fundamental issue remains quantum field interference in sections 8 through 12. Every solution we attempt creates cascading errors. Like dominoes falling," Dr. Foster added grimly. "Fix one problem, create 3 more." Outside the boardroom, Emma had grown restless with excitement. She could see the solution so clearly that sitting still felt impossible. Her small body practically vibrated with the need to share what she'd discovered. The adults inside looked frustrated and sad, but their sadness was unnecessary. The answer was right there, waiting for someone to approach it correctly. "Mama," she said, tugging at Maria's cleaning uniform, "they need help. I can help them." Maria paused in her work, setting down her spray bottle. "Mija, these are very important people doing very important work. They don't need—" "But they do." Emma's voice carried surprising authority for an 8-year-old. "They're treating the numbers like enemies instead of friends. The equation wants to work, but they keep forcing it wrong." Through the glass wall, the room's occupants looked like generals losing a crucial battle. 23 Nobel Prize winners, 15 MacArthur Genius Grant recipients, and the most decorated physics minds of their generation. all defeated by mathematical relationships an 8-year-old could see clearly. Harrison checked his watch and felt his heart sink. In 4 hours, he would face the board of directors with nothing to show for 3 months of intensive work and millions of dollars in expenses. The media had already begun speculating about Whitmore Industries' potential failure, and competitor stocks rose while his company's value plummeted. Perhaps, Dr. Walsh suggested quietly, we should consider that this particular equation represents a level of complexity that current human understanding cannot. No, Harrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. I refuse to accept defeat. My grandfather didn't accept defeat when everyone said human flight was impossible. My father didn't accept defeat when they said personal computers would never sell. But the weight of legacy felt crushing now instead of inspiring. 3 generations of innovation and breakthrough threatened to end with his failure to solve a single mathematical problem. Emma pressed her small hand against the glass wall, her breath fogging the surface as she studied the equation one more time. In her mind, she could see exactly where the adults went wrong. They approached mathematics like construction workers, forcing pieces into place, when they should approach it like gardeners, helping natural growth occur. The pretty numbers are crying, she whispered to herself. They want to dance, but the smart people won't let them. Her childish metaphor contained profound truth. The equation wasn't a problem to be conquered, but a symphony waiting for the right conductor. The mathematical relationships wanted to flow naturally, but academic training had taught the experts to impose solutions rather than discover them. Dr. Chen slumped in her chair, exhaustion finally overtaking ambition. I need to call my university. They'll want to know why I've been absent from teaching duties without results to show for it. We all have explanations to give, Dr. Torres added grimly, reputations to repair. The room fell silent as 38 brilliant minds contemplated professional humiliation. Years of study, decades of achievement, lifetimes of dedication, all potentially meaningless in the face of mathematical impossibility. Emma's stomach growled loudly in the hallway, reminding her of the hunger that had become her constant companion. But the rumbling sound gave her an idea. These important people had so much food they didn't eat. Maybe, if she helped them solve their problem, they would share some of that abundance. With the innocent confidence of childhood, she made a decision that would change everything. Taking a deep breath, Emma walked toward the boardroom door, her small hand reaching for the handle that would open the door between impossible and inevitable. The equation waited on the whiteboard, ready to reveal its secrets to the one mind that saw mathematics not as enemy, but as friend. Emma's small hand turned the heavy brass door handle with surprising determination. The click echoed through the marble hallway like a gunshot, but inside the boardroom, 38 exhausted minds barely registered the sound. They were too deep in their mathematical despair to notice that their salvation had just walked through the door. "Excuse me?" Emma's clear voice cut through the heavy atmosphere, her 8-year-old pronunciation careful and precise. "I think you're doing the numbers wrong." The room fell dead silent. 38 pairs of eyes turned toward the source of interruption, a small girl in a faded pink dress, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her shoes worn but clean. She stood in the doorway, like David facing Goliath, unaware that she was interrupting some of the most brilliant minds in the world. "Doctor." Chen was the first to recover from shock. "Sweetheart, this is a private meeting. You shouldn't be—" "I can solve it," Emma announced with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "Your equation. I can fix what's broken." Harrison felt a mixture of irritation and incredulity wash over him. 3 months of intensive work by Nobel laureates, and now an 8-year-old claimed she could solve what they couldn't? "Young lady, this is extremely complex mathematics that requires—" "I know," Emma interrupted, stepping further into the room. Her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, reminding everyone of the real world, beyond mathematical abstractions. "I've been watching through the glass. You keep fighting the numbers instead of dancing with them." Dr. Morrison stood up, his professional courtesy warring with exhaustion. "Child, these are quantum field equations that doctoral candidates struggle to understand. Perhaps you should find your parents." "My mama is cleaning your offices," Emma replied matter-of-factly, "and I understand the numbers fine. You just need to let them flow like water instead of building walls around them." Her metaphor hung in the air, deceptively simple yet somehow profound. Dr. Walsh found herself intrigued despite her skepticism. "What do you mean by flow like water?" Emma approached the main whiteboard, her small frame dwarfed by the massive equations that had defeated brilliant minds for months. "See here?" She pointed to section 7 without touching the board. "You're trying to make this part equal this part, but they don't want to be equal. They want to complement each other like music harmonies." The room remained silent, but something had shifted. 38 experts found themselves listening to a child who saw mathematics not as rigid rules, but as living, breathing relationships. "Look," Emma continued, her young voice gaining confidence. "In section 3, you have quantum interference patterns, right? But you're treating them like they're separate from the electromagnetic calculations in section 8. They're not separate. They're dancing partners." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her disbelief. "What do you mean by dancing partners? In real dancing, you don't force your partner to move exactly like you. You move together but different. The quantum stuff and the electromagnetic stuff, they want to move together but different." Harrison felt something stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, but a crack in his despair. "And how would you suggest we let them dance together?" Emma studied the equation with the intensity of a master musician reading a complex score. "You need to change the integration here." She pointed to a section that had caused particular problems. "Instead of treating it as a linear progression, make it spiral, like how water goes down a drain, but prettier." The room held its collective breath. Dr. Chen approached the whiteboard, marker in hand. "Show me exactly what you mean." Emma looked at the marker, then at the 38 brilliant faces watching her. For the first time since entering the room, her confidence wavered slightly. I don't know how to write the fancy symbols, but I can see how they should go." "Then tell us," Harrison said, his voice gentler now. "Describe what you see." Emma took a deep breath and began describing mathematical relationships with the clarity of pure intuition. As she spoke, describing spirals and harmonies and natural flows, something extraordinary happened. The experts began to see their equation through her eyes, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a puzzle that wanted to be solved. Dr. Foster started translating Emma's descriptions into mathematical notation, her hand moving quickly across a fresh section of whiteboard. With each symbol she wrote, following the child's guidance, the equation began to transform. "Wait," Dr. Morrison said suddenly, his eyes widening. "If we apply spiral integration to section 7 while maintaining harmonic resonance with section 8, the room exploded into activity. 38 brilliant minds suddenly saw pathways they had missed, connections they had overlooked, possibilities they had dismissed, all because an 8-year-old girl saw mathematics as music instead of warfare. Emma stepped back, watching the adults frantically calculate, her small face glowing with satisfaction. She had kept her promise to help them, and now maybe, just maybe, they would share some of that wonderful food going to waste. The transformation in the boardroom was electric. Dr. Chen's marker flew across the whiteboard as she translated Emma's intuitive descriptions into precise mathematical notation, her movements urgent with newfound purpose. "The spiral integration eliminates the cascade errors we've been fighting for months." "Brilliant!" Dr. Park exclaimed, his exhaustion forgotten as he worked alongside her. "The harmonic resonance approach allows the quantum and electromagnetic components to complement rather than interfere with each other." Emma watched the flurry of activity with wide eyes, amazed at how quickly the sad, frustrated adults had become excited and energetic. They scribbled numbers and symbols with the enthusiasm of children at play, their earlier despair replaced by electric anticipation. Harrison stood transfixed, watching his team of experts build upon the foundation that an 8-year-old girl had provided. The equation that had mocked them for 3 months was finally yielding its secrets, not through brute intellectual force, but through a child's intuitive understanding of mathematical harmony. "Young lady," he said, approaching Emma carefully, "what's your name?" "Emma Santos," she replied, her confidence returning as she saw the positive results of her intervention. "My mama is Maria Santos. She cleans your building." "Emma Santos," Harrison repeated thoughtfully. "Tell me, how did you know what we were doing wrong?" Emma tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness of youth. "The numbers looked sad and angry, like when my mama tries to force our old radio to work by hitting it, but it only works when she's gentle and patient." Dr. Walsh paused in her calculations, struck by the profound simplicity of the analogy. "You saw the equation as emotional." "Not emotional exactly," Emma said, searching for the right words, "but alive. Math is alive, like music or dancing. You can't force it to do what you want. You have to ask it nicely and let it show you what it wants to be." Adim. The room fell silent for a moment as 38 brilliant minds contemplated this radically different approach to their field. They had spent decades treating mathematics as a tool to be wielded, but Emma saw it as a partner to be understood. Dr. Morrison looked up from his calculations, his face showing wonder. "The spiral integration is working. Section 12 is resolving beautifully. And the electromagnetic harmonics are stabilizing the quantum field fluctuations instead of amplifying them," Dr. Vasquez added excitedly. Harrison felt his phone buzzing with calls from board members, but for the first time in months, he ignored them completely. Something miraculous was happening in his boardroom, and he wouldn't miss it for anything. Emma's stomach growled again, loudly enough that several people noticed. She pressed her small hand against her middle, embarrassed but trying to hide it. The excitement of helping solve the equation had made her forget her hunger temporarily, but now it returned with force. "When did you last eat?" Harrison asked, his voice gentle with concern. "This morning," Emma replied honestly. "Mama and I shared some bread before work." The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the different worlds that existed within the same building. While they debated equations worth trillions, this brilliant child survived on shared crumbs. "Dr. Chen," Harrison said quietly, "would you please ask catering to prepare a proper meal for our young consultant?" "Consultant?" Emma's eyes lit up with delight. "Does that mean I'm helping for real?" "You're doing more than helping," Harrison replied, his voice carrying new respect. "You're saving our entire project." Dr. Foster looked up from the whiteboard where she'd been working frantically. "Sir, we're making incredible progress. If Emma's approach continues to hold, we could have a complete solution within hours." "Hours instead of months," Dr. Torres added, shaking his head in amazement. "All because we learned to stop fighting mathematics and start dancing with it." Emma beamed at the praise, her small chest swelling with pride. She had never felt so useful, so important, so valued. These incredibly smart adults were listening to her ideas and treating her like an equal. "There's more," she said suddenly, looking at a section of the equation that still seemed slightly off to her trained eye. "In section 10, you're still pushing a little bit. If you make it more like a gentle curve instead of a straight line." The experts rushed to implement her suggestion, their movements coordinated like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Emma's unique perspective had unlocked not just a solution, but an entirely new way of approaching complex mathematical problems. As the afternoon sun shifted lower in the sky, casting warm golden light across the boardroom, something extraordinary was taking shape. The impossible was becoming inevitable, all because an 8-year-old girl had seen mathematics not as conquest, but as collaboration. The equation that had defeated brilliant minds for months was finally ready to surrender its secrets to the power of childlike wonder and genuine understanding. The boardroom had transformed into a symphony of intellectual excitement. Markers squeaked against whiteboards as 38 brilliant minds worked with unprecedented coordination, building upon Emma's revolutionary insights. The child stood at the center of it all, her small frame dwarfed by towering adults, yet commanding their complete attention and respect. The resonance patterns are stabilizing perfectly, Dr. Bu, Chen announced, her voice trembling with excitement. Emma's harmonic approach is eliminating decades of theoretical roadblocks. Dr. Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead, his earlier exhaustion replaced by manic energy. I've never seen quantum field calculations resolve so elegantly. It's like the mathematics is cooperating instead of resisting. Emma watched the frenzied activity with growing amazement. These incredibly smart people were using her ideas to solve problems that could change the world. She felt important and valued in a way she'd never experienced before, not as a burden or obstacle, but as a contributor to something magnificent. Harrison couldn't tear his eyes away from the evolving solution. Months of despair were melting away as the equation yielded section by section to Emma's intuitive understanding. "Young lady," he said, approaching her carefully, "do you understand what you've accomplished here?" "I helped fix the sad numbers," Emma replied with characteristic simplicity. "Now they're happy and working together instead of fighting." "You've done much more than that." Harrison's voice carried profound respect. "You've potentially revolutionized quantum computing, which could transform medicine, space exploration, artificial intelligence, everything." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Just by being nice to the numbers? Just by seeing what we couldn't see?" Dr. Walsh interjected, looking up from her calculations. "We were so focused on forcing solutions that we missed the natural pathways the mathematics wanted to follow." A catering assistant appeared at the boardroom door, wheeling in a cart laden with fresh food. Harrison had ordered a complete meal for Emma. Sandwiches, fruit, milk, cookies, more food than she typically saw in a week. "For me?" Emma asked, her eyes reflecting disbelief and delight. "For our chief consultant," Harrison replied with a smile. "The person who saved our project deserves proper nutrition." Emma approached the food cart as if it were treasure. She selected a sandwich with careful reverence, taking small bites to make it last longer. The flavors seemed impossibly rich after months of subsistence meals. "Mama will be so happy," she said between bites. "She worries when I'm hungry, but she can't help it. We don't have much money." The words struck the room like lightning. These brilliant minds, focused on trillion-dollar breakthroughs, suddenly faced the reality of genuine poverty existing just outside their privileged bubble. Dr. Vasquez felt tears forming in her eyes. "Emma, how often are you hungry?" "Most days," Emma answered honestly, not understanding why the question made the adults look so sad. "But it's okay. Mama works very hard, and someday things will be better." Harrison felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This remarkable child, who had just saved his company and potentially changed the world, lived with daily hunger while he worried about stock prices and board meetings. "Dr. Foster," he said quietly, "how close are we to a complete solution?" "With Emma's framework, I estimate 2 hours maximum," she replied. "The mathematical foundations she's provided are solid. We're essentially filling in details now. 2 hours. After 3 months of failure, they were 2 hours away from the breakthrough that would revolutionize technology and secure Whitmore Industries' future for generations. Emma finished her sandwich and carefully wrapped the remaining half in a napkin. "For Mama," she explained when she noticed the adults watching. "She'll be so excited to taste something this good." The gesture of generosity, a hungry child saving food for her mother, touched every heart in the room. These people who measured success in billions were witnessing wealth that couldn't be calculated. The riches of love, sacrifice, and unselfish care. "Emma," Harrison said, his voice carrying new gravity, "I want to discuss something important with you and your mother. What you've done today. It changes everything, not just for our company, but for you and your family." Emma looked up at him with curious eyes, a cookie halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Harrison said, his decision crystallizing as he spoke, that brilliant minds deserve brilliant opportunities, and hunger should never be part of genius. Dr. Chen paused in her calculations, understanding immediately what Harrison was considering. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the magnitude of what was happening, not just mathematical breakthrough, but human transformation. Emma had saved their project, but somehow in the process they were discovering that she might be saving something much more important, their understanding of what truly mattered in life. The equation continued its march toward completion, but now it seemed less important than the small girl who had made it possible. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway, her heart heavy with worry. Emma had been unusually quiet during their brief lunch break, and now her daughter was nowhere to be found. The expensive hallways of Whitmore Industries suddenly felt more like a maze designed to separate people like her from people like them. "Emma!" she called softly, not wanting to disturb the important people who worked in these glass offices. "Mija, ¿dónde estás?" Her search led her toward the executive floor, where she normally wasn't allowed to clean during business hours. The boardroom door stood slightly ajar, and voices drifted through the opening, excited voices, happy voices, and underneath it all, her daughter's unmistakable laugh. Maria's blood ran cold. Emma was inside the boardroom with the most important people in the company. This could mean termination, eviction, disaster for their already precarious existence. She rushed toward the door, preparing to apologize profusely and extract her daughter before more damage could be done. But when she peered through the opening, the scene inside stopped her heart completely. Emma sat at the massive mahogany table, surrounded by men and women in expensive suits, eating what looked like a feast while pointing at enormous whiteboards covered in numbers. The adults weren't angry or annoyed. They were listening to her 8-year-old daughter with the intensity of students learning from a master teacher. "And if you curve this section like a smile instead of a frown," Emma was saying, gesturing at the whiteboard with a half-eaten cookie in her hand, "the numbers will be much happier working together." Dr. Chen carefully translated Emma's description into mathematical notation, her face glowing with excitement. "Brilliant! The curved integration eliminates the final resonance conflicts." "We're almost there," Dr. Morrison announced, his voice trembling with anticipation. "Section 15 is the last piece of the puzzle." Maria stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what she was witnessing. Her daughter, her hungry, brilliant, impossible daughter, was somehow teaching mathematics to people who probably had more degrees than Maria had years of education. Harrison noticed Maria's presence and approached the door with a warm smile. "Mrs. Santos, please come in. Your daughter is extraordinary." "I'm so sorry," Maria began in heavily accented English, her hands shaking. "Emma should not be bothering you. I take her away right now." "Mama!" Emma jumped up from her chair and ran to her mother, her face radiating joy. "I helped them fix their sad numbers, and look, they gave me so much food." She held up the wrapped half sandwich. "This is for you." Maria accepted the sandwich with trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears. In their world, sharing food was the ultimate expression of love, and Emma had thought of her even in this moment of triumph. "Mrs. Santos," Harrison said gently, "your daughter has accomplished something remarkable today. She's solved a mathematical problem that stumped 38 of the world's most brilliant minds for 3 months." "I don't understand," Maria whispered, clutching Emma's small hand. Dr. Walsh approached them, her face kind but serious. "Your daughter has a gift that we've never encountered before. She sees mathematical relationships in ways that could revolutionize science itself. She's always been good with numbers," Maria said carefully, not wanting to seem boastful. "Teachers say she's smart, but we cannot afford special programs." "That's about to change," Harrison declared, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to making life-altering decisions. "Mrs. Santos, I want to offer you and Emma something that will transform your lives." The room fell silent as everyone understood the magnitude of the moment. Emma had given them the key to billions of dollars in breakthrough technology, but more than that, she had given them perspective on what truly mattered. "What do you mean?" Maria asked, her protective instincts warring with desperate hope. "I mean," Harrison said, looking directly at Emma, "that genius should never go hungry. That brilliant minds deserve brilliant opportunities. That Emma's gift belongs in the best schools, with the best teachers, with unlimited resources to grow and flourish." Emma looked up at her mother, her young face serious. "Does this mean we won't be hungry anymore, Mama?" Maria's tears flowed freely now. 20 years of cleaning floors, of choosing between electricity and groceries, of watching her brilliant daughter dim her light to fit their circumstances, all of it crystallizing into this impossible moment of transformation. "I think, Mika," she whispered through her tears, "that everything is about to change. Doctor." Foster looked up from the whiteboard, where she'd been making final calculations. "Sir, we have it, the complete solution. Emma's approach works flawlessly." The room erupted in cheers, but Emma only had eyes for her mother, watching hope bloom in Maria's weathered face like sunrise after the longest night. Their lives were about to transform in ways they couldn't yet imagine, but in this moment, mother and daughter simply held each other, sharing a sandwich that tasted like the future itself. The boardroom buzzed with electric energy as the final calculations locked into place. "Doctor." Chen stepped back from the whiteboard, her marker trembling in her hand as she stared at the completed equation that had tormented them for 3 grueling months. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Every section, every variable, every relationship, it all works." 38 brilliant minds stood in awed silence, contemplating the mathematical poetry that Emma's insights had revealed. The equation stretched across 4 whiteboards now, elegant and complete, its complex relationships flowing like a symphony written in numbers and symbols. "Run the verification protocols," Harrison commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "I want triple confirmation before we proceed." Dr. Morrison's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, feeding the solution into the quantum simulation software. The room held its collective breath as processing indicators spun on the screen. Then one by one, green check marks appeared beside each calculation. "All variables confirmed," he announced, his voice cracking with emotion. "The solution is mathematically sound across all quantum field parameters." Dr. Vasquez pulled up the practical applications interface, her hands shaking with anticipation. Energy efficiency calculations show 847% improvement over current methods. Processing speed increases by factors we've never dreamed possible. Emma watched the adults celebrate with growing confusion. They seemed happy about something she'd helped create, but their joy felt different from hers, bigger somehow, more complicated. She tugged at Harrison's expensive suit jacket. "Mr. Harrison," she said, "why is everyone so excited about fixing the numbers? I thought you wanted me to help so you wouldn't be sad anymore." Harrison knelt down to Emma's level, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Emma, what you've helped us create today will change the world. This equation, your equation, will help doctors cure diseases faster, help scientists explore space, help computers think in ways we never imagined possible." "Really?" Emma's eyes widened with wonder. "Just from making the numbers happy?" "Just from making the numbers happy," Harrison confirmed, marveling at the profound simplicity of her perspective. Maria stood nearby, still clutching the sandwich Emma had saved for her, trying to process the surreal scene unfolding around them. These powerful people treated her daughter like a treasured colleague. Speaking to Emma with respect, Maria had rarely experienced herself. Dr. Park approached them with a tablet displaying news headlines that were already beginning to appear online. "Sir, word is spreading. Whitmore Industries achieves quantum computing breakthrough is trending globally. Johnson Industries' stock is plummeting," Dr. Foster added, checking her phone. "Our breakthrough just made their 3-year research program obsolete." Harrison felt the weight of generational pressure lifting from his shoulders. The family legacy was secure. The company's future guaranteed, and the technological revolution they'd dreamed of was now within reach. But as he looked at Emma's innocent face, he realized that saving his empire felt less important than what came next. "Mrs. Santos," he said, turning to Maria with decision crystallizing in his voice, "I want to discuss Emma's future. Her gift is unprecedented, and with proper nurturing, she could become one of the greatest mathematical minds in history." "What are you saying?" Maria asked carefully, her protective instincts on high alert. "I'm saying that Emma deserves the best education money can provide. Private tutors, access to university resources, mentorship from the world's leading mathematicians. I want to establish a full scholarship fund for her education, from elementary school through graduate studies." Emma looked between the adults, sensing the weight of their conversation without fully understanding its implications. "Does this mean I get to learn more about making numbers happy?" "So much more," Dr. Chen interjected, her voice warm with possibility. "You could learn about the mathematics that governs stars and planets, the equations that describe how life itself works, the numbers that could help us understand the entire universe. And we won't be hungry anymore?" Emma asked with the practical wisdom of a child who'd known scarcity. Harrison's heart broke at the question's simple directness. "Never again," he promised. "I want to offer your mother a position here at Whitmore Industries. Full benefits, excellent salary, and flexible hours so she can support your education." Maria's legs nearly gave out. A stable job with benefits, her daughter's education secured, an end to the constant fear of eviction and hunger. It seemed too good to be true. "But," Harrison continued, his voice growing serious, "I want something in return." The room fell silent. Maria's brief hope dimmed as she waited for the catch, the condition that would make their salvation conditional. "I want Emma to remain Emma," Harrison said quietly. "I want her curiosity protected, her joy preserved, her unique way of seeing the world nurtured instead of standardized. The moment we turn her gift into just another academic achievement, we lose something precious." Emma smiled up at him with the radiant confidence of childhood. "Don't worry, Mr. Harrison. The numbers will always be my friends, no matter how much I learn about them." Her simple statement carried profound wisdom that touched every heart in the room. Success, achievement, knowledge, none of it mattered if wonder died in the process. The equation stood complete on the whiteboards behind them, representing billions in potential revenue and decades of scientific advancement. But the real treasure sat at the conference table, finishing cookies and planning to share food with her mother, her genius intact and her heart unbroken. 1 week later, the transformation was complete, but somehow just beginning. Emma sat in Harrison's private office, now officially designated as her learning space, surrounded by mathematics books appropriate for her age, alongside university-level texts that challenged her growing mind. The contrast perfectly captured the delicate balance they were striving to maintain, nurturing her gift while preserving her childhood. "Tell me about the new equation, Emma," Harrison said, settling into the chair beside her rather than behind his imposing desk. The power dynamics had shifted fundamentally. He now saw himself as her protector and facilitator rather than authority figure. Emma looked up from her notebook, where she'd been working on problems that would challenge graduate students. "It's about making energy dance instead of just moving in straight lines," she explained with characteristic simplicity. "Like the difference between marching and dancing, same muscles, but dancing is prettier and more efficient." Harrison marveled at her ability to distill complex concepts into metaphors that illuminated rather than obscured truth. The quantum computing breakthrough had made headlines worldwide, but Emma seemed more interested in the beauty of mathematical relationships than the fame and fortune they'd generated. Maria appeared in the doorway, wearing the professional attire that came with her new position as Director of Facilities Operations, a role that utilized her 20 years of building management experience while providing the stability and respect she'd never experienced before. "How was your first session with Dr. Peterson?" Maria asked, referring to the child psychologist Harrison had hired to ensure Emma's emotional well-being during her rapid educational advancement. "She's nice," Emma replied. "She wanted to know if I felt different now that everyone calls me smart. I told her I always knew I was smart. I just didn't know other people cared." The statement struck both adults with its matter-of-fact wisdom. Emma's sense of self remained anchored in her own understanding rather than external validation, a psychological strength that would serve her well in the years ahead. Dr. Chen knocked on the open door, her face glowing with excitement. "Emma, I have wonderful news. My tea wants to invite you to their summer mathematics camp for gifted children. You'd be the youngest participant ever, but they're creating a special program just for you." "Will there be other kids who like to make numbers happy?" Emma asked with typical directness. "Many of them," Dr. Chen assured her. "And professors who've spent their whole lives studying the kind of mathematical poetry you see naturally." Emma considered this seriously. "Can Mama come with me?" "Of course," Harrison interjected quickly. "Your mother will accompany you everywhere until you're old enough to choose otherwise. Part of preserving who you are means preserving the relationships that matter most to you." Through the office windows, the city sprawled below them, full of people pursuing their own versions of success and meaning. Emma had inadvertently achieved both, but her focus remained on simpler things, making her mother smile, finding new ways to understand mathematical beauty, and ensuring that no one in her expanding world went hungry. "Mr. Harrison," Emma said suddenly, "can I ask you something important?" "Anything, Emma." "There are other kids like me out there, aren't there? Kids who see things differently but don't have people to help them." Harrison felt his heart expand with pride and purpose. Even at 8 years old, even while processing her own transformation, Emma was thinking about others who might need help. "Yes," he said quietly. "There are many children with gifts that go unrecognized, especially children from families without resources. Then we should help them too," Emma declared, with the moral clarity that only children possess. "If making numbers happy can change our lives this much, imagine what could happen if we helped lots of kids make their special things happy." Maria's eyes filled with tears of pride. Despite all the changes, all the opportunities and recognition, Emma remained the generous-hearted child who had saved half a sandwich for her mother. Harrison felt something click into place. A purpose larger than corporate success or technological achievement. "Emma, would you like to help me start a foundation? Something that finds children with special gifts and makes sure they get the support they need. Can we call it the Happy Numbers Foundation?" Emma asked, her face lighting up with possibility. "We can call it whatever you want," Harrison replied, already envisioning the impact such an organization could have. Emma's story was miraculous, but it didn't have to be unique. Dr. Chen smiled at the exchange, remembering her own childhood when mathematical concepts had seemed like magic, but no one had believed in her potential. "I'd like to help with that foundation," she offered. "Every brilliant mind deserves a chance to shine." Emma looked around the office at the adults who had become her extended family, at her mother, whose face now showed hope instead of constant worry, at the walls covered with equations that represented not conquest, but collaboration. "You know what I think?" she said, closing her notebook and standing up with the confidence of someone who had learned she could change the world. "What do you think, Mia?" Maria asked, using the familiar endearment that grounded them both in love. "I think the best part about making numbers happy isn't the numbers at all," Emma said with wisdom beyond her years. "It's that when you help something be what it wants to be, everything gets better. Numbers, people, families, whole companies, everything." She walked to the window and looked out at the city below, her small hand pressed against the glass. Somewhere out there were other children like her, other families struggling, other gifts waiting to be discovered and nurtured. The equation that had changed their lives was just the beginning. Emma Santos, 8 years old and no longer hungry, was ready to help change the world, one happy number, one hopeful child, one rescued dream at a time. In the end, the greatest breakthrough hadn't been mathematical at all. It had been the recognition that genius comes in many forms, that hunger diminishes brilliance, and that sometimes the most sophisticated problems require the simplest solutions: kindness, opportunity, and the courage to listen to voices that speak different languages of wisdom. Emma's story was complete, but her journey was just beginning.